Imagine waking beside the sea and watching the horizon suddenly disappear completely. Not from storms, fog, or darkness, but from ships beyond counting. Thousands of sails emerged like a moving forest across the ocean itself. Fishermen stopped working while merchants stared toward the distant horizon nervously. One ship appeared first, then dozens, then hundreds beyond imagination entirely. The sea transformed into an endless armada stretching beyond sight alone. Kingdoms trembled whenever this fleet appeared unexpectedly near their shores suddenly. No navy on Earth had ever matched its extraordinary scale before. It looked less like ships and more like a floating empire. At its center stood a man whose existence defied expectations completely. His name was Zheng He, known across oceans and continents alike. Yet he was never supposed to become one of history's legends. Before commanding oceans, he was simply a frightened boy named He. Before leading fleets, he lost everything during the chaos of war. Home vanished. Family vanished. The future seemed stolen forever from him. Most people would break beneath such overwhelming suffering and loss completely. Yet sometimes tragedy creates individuals capable of changing the world forever. Zheng He became one of those extraordinary people through unimaginable circumstances. His journey began with captivity, uncertainty, and a future hidden entirely. No one could predict where fate would eventually carry him next. Least of all the boy standing frightened amid the ruins behind. One day he would command the greatest fleet humanity had witnessed, and his voyages would reshape relationships across half the known world. But the greatest mystery is not how he rose but vanished. Long before oceans knew his name, He lived far inland peacefully. He was born in Yunnan, surrounded by mountains instead of seas. Nothing suggested his future would become tied to distant horizons forever. His childhood was ordinary, filled with routines familiar to countless families. The world felt stable, predictable, and comfortably understandable around him. Then history arrived without permission, carrying war into his life. Armies marched through the region as political struggles intensified rapidly everywhere. The conflict cared little about dreams, innocence, or childhood itself. War rarely asks who deserves suffering before delivering it mercilessly. Villages burned while families scattered in fear and confusion suddenly. Everything familiar began collapsing around the young boy unexpectedly. One day changed the course of his entire existence forever. He watched the world he knew disappear before his eyes. The safety of childhood vanished beneath the weight of conquest completely. Loss arrived quickly, leaving wounds deeper than words could describe. Captured by Ming forces, he entered a future nobody could predict. He was no longer a child with choices of his own. He became part of a system larger than himself entirely. Many lives end when freedom disappears, but some transform instead unexpectedly. Adversity sometimes reveals strengths hidden beneath ordinary circumstances for years. He carried pain, but also determination growing silently within. The boy who lost everything had gained something equally powerful unexpectedly, a relentless will to survive whatever fate placed before him. That determination would eventually carry him farther than any emperor imagined. Captivity brought He into the heart of a powerful empire unexpectedly. Inside the Ming court, survival required intelligence more than strength alone. He learned quickly, watching everything and speaking only when necessary. While others chased attention, He studied people carefully instead. He observed ambition, fear, loyalty, and deception inside palace walls. Knowledge became his weapon in a world ruled by power. Eventually, he entered the service of Prince Zhu directly. The prince was ambitious, intelligent, and determined to seize greatness. Their destinies would soon become tightly connected through history itself. He proved reliable in situations where failure carried deadly consequences. Trust is rare near power, making it more valuable than gold. Slowly, he earned a place among the prince's trusted companions. Political conflict intensified as rival factions competed for imperial authority. Zhu launched a struggle that would determine China's future leadership. The risks were enormous, and defeat could mean execution immediately. Through uncertainty and danger, He remained fiercely loyal throughout. He supported the prince when victory seemed far from certain. Loyalty forged during crisis often creates unbreakable bonds between individuals. Eventually, Zhu triumphed and claimed the throne as Yongle Emperor. The victory reshaped the empire and transformed countless lives forever. Among those transformed most dramatically was the former captive Ma He. The emperor rewarded him with honor, influence, and a new name. Ma He became Zheng He, trusted servant of the Ming throne. Soon he would receive a mission larger than imagination itself. Emperor Yongle dreamed bigger than most rulers dared imagine during his reign. He wanted the world to recognize Ming China's unmatched power everywhere. To achieve that goal, he ordered something almost unbelievable entirely. Shipyards exploded with activity across the empire day and night. Forests supplied enormous quantities of timber for ambitious construction projects. Thousands of workers labored tirelessly toward a shared imperial vision. They were building ships larger than anything the world had seen. Some vessels seemed less like ships and more like floating cities. Their scale challenged imagination itself and stunned future generations alike. Dockyards stretched endlessly, crowded with unfinished giants awaiting completion patiently. Every hammer strike echoed with the ambition of an empire. China was preparing to reach beyond familiar horizons dramatically. Yongle viewed the project as both diplomacy and strategic influence simultaneously. Strength displayed peacefully can often achieve more than war alone. The emperor needed someone capable of leading this unprecedented mission. His choice was Zheng He, trusted beyond nearly anyone else. The former captive now carried the hopes of an empire. His responsibility extended across oceans not yet fully understood then. Finally, the fleet stood assembled, immense beyond ordinary comprehension entirely. Hundreds of ships gathered together in an astonishing display of power. Tens of thousands of sailors awaited departure toward distant lands. When the fleet entered open waters, history quietly changed direction. No kingdom had ever launched such a colossal maritime expedition before, and this was only the beginning of Zheng He's legend. The day finally arrived when the treasure fleet entered open waters proudly. Thousands watched from shore as history sailed beyond the horizon. The ocean suddenly became the stage for China's greatest expedition. Waves crashed against ships carrying diplomats, soldiers, merchants, and explorers. Together they formed a floating kingdom unlike anything previously assembled. Every sail represented ambition stretching far beyond China's coastline itself. The first foreign ports reacted with disbelief upon seeing the fleet. Rumors spread faster than the ships themselves across trading networks. People whispered about giant vessels appearing from distant eastern seas. Local rulers hurriedly gathered advisors to understand this unprecedented arrival. Was it an invasion, a trade mission, or something else? Nobody could ignore a fleet of such overwhelming magnitude. Yet Zheng He did not arrive carrying threats immediately. He brought gifts, messages, and opportunities for diplomatic relationships instead. Power displayed through generosity often creates deeper influence than force. Ceremonies welcomed the fleet while negotiations unfolded behind palace walls. Alliances formed as trust slowly replaced fear among foreign leaders. Trade routes expanded through conversations rather than battlefield victories alone. Still, the fleet's immense presence remained impossible to overlook entirely. Every harbor understood the strength anchored just beyond their shores. Diplomacy worked partly because everyone knew power stood nearby always. Voyage after voyage connected regions separated by distance and uncertainty. The treasure fleet transformed oceans into highways linking diverse civilizations together. But not every encounter would end with peaceful exchanges alone. Oceans connect civilizations, but they also attract danger and ambition alike. Trade routes were valuable, making them irresistible targets for pirates everywhere. Not everyone welcomed Zheng He's growing influence across the seas. Some saw opportunity, others saw threats requiring immediate resistance instead. Pirate fleets monitored movements, searching for weaknesses to exploit ruthlessly. They underestimated the discipline and strength of the treasure fleet. Naval clashes erupted as pirates challenged one of history's greatest armadas. The battles were swift, decisive, and devastating for the attackers. Zheng He proved diplomacy worked best when backed by strength. Captured pirate leaders suddenly faced the consequences of their decisions. Word spread quickly throughout maritime networks after these confrontations. Few wished to challenge the fleet once its capabilities became known. Yet pirates were not the most dangerous obstacle awaiting Zheng He. Political intrigue often creates deeper wounds than open warfare ever could. In Sri Lanka, tensions escalated into a dangerous struggle for influence. Meetings meant for diplomacy slowly transformed into mutual suspicion and hostility. Every conversation carried hidden motives beneath carefully chosen words and gestures. Trust vanished as rapidly as it had originally been offered. Conflict eventually erupted, forcing Zheng He to make difficult choices. Peace remained his goal, but survival demanded decisive action sometimes. Political rivals discovered that diplomacy and weakness are not identical. Later, standing beneath the stars, Zheng He reflected quietly alone. Every successful voyage seemed to carry increasingly complicated consequences afterward. And the farther he sailed, the heavier responsibility became. With each voyage, the treasure fleet pushed beyond familiar boundaries continuously. Oceans once considered distant became pathways connecting extraordinary civilizations together. Zheng He was not merely traveling, he was expanding perspectives. India welcomed the fleet with bustling ports rich in commerce. Markets overflowed with spices, fabrics, jewels, and countless opportunities. Every harbor revealed a different chapter of humanity's story unfolding. Diplomacy flourished as rulers exchanged gifts and forged relationships carefully. Mutual respect often opened doors that force never could unlock. The fleet became a bridge between distant worlds and cultures. Further west, the great cities of Arabia came into view. Their architecture, traditions, and knowledge impressed even seasoned travelers greatly. The world seemed larger and more interconnected than imagined previously. Then came Africa, mysterious and distant in many Chinese accounts. The arrival astonished both visitors and local communities alike immediately. New landscapes challenged assumptions formed from stories and distant rumors. Among the wonders encountered were animals unlike anything seen before. Giraffes appeared almost mythical, as though walking from ancient legends. Curiosity replaced certainty as explorers confronted unfamiliar realities daily. Trade expanded, but so did understanding between very different peoples. Goods moved across oceans, carrying ideas alongside valuable commodities everywhere. The voyages connected continents long before globalization became a concept. Standing on distant shores, Zheng He often looked outward thoughtfully. The farther he traveled, the more endless the world appeared. Yet his greatest achievements were still waiting ahead unexpectedly. By now, Zheng He's fleet had become a legend across oceans everywhere. Its arrival inspired awe long before ships entered harbor waters. Entire kingdoms prepared carefully whenever news of the fleet spread. Rulers welcomed Zheng He with ceremonies, gifts, and diplomatic respect. Relationships strengthened as trust expanded between distant governments steadily. Few missions in history achieved influence on such a scale. Trade networks flourished, linking cultures separated by enormous distances previously. Goods traveled farther, faster, and more safely than before. Ideas crossed borders alongside merchants, ambassadors, and travelers alike. The fleet had become more than ships. It became connection itself. Across countless ports, Ming China's prestige reached unprecedented heights internationally. It seemed the empire had discovered a formula for lasting influence. Standing atop his flagship, Zheng He could witness the achievement personally. Hundreds of vessels obeyed signals carried across wind and water. The former captive now commanded a maritime force beyond imagination. Back in China, Emperor Yongle celebrated reports of continued success. His vision appeared validated by every completed voyage returning home. The treasure fleet had fulfilled nearly every goal originally intended. Exotic goods arrived alongside diplomats from lands once barely known. The empire stood at the height of confidence and ambition. Success seemed unstoppable, almost destined to continue indefinitely into future. Yet history often hides danger behind moments of greatest triumph. While oceans celebrated Zheng He's achievements, whispers grew within palace walls. And those whispers threatened everything he had built painstakingly. Every empire eventually discovers that success cannot defeat time forever completely. The same truth now approached Emperor Yongle and his ambitions. Age and responsibility gradually weighed upon the ruler's shoulders heavily. Inside the palace, debates grew louder with each passing year. Some officials admired the voyages while others questioned their value. Success alone could not silence concerns about cost and priorities. Then came the moment that changed everything without warning suddenly. Emperor Yongle died, leaving behind both achievements and uncertainties. The architect of the treasure fleet was gone forever now. Far away at sea, Zheng He received the devastating news. The loss felt personal as well as deeply political immediately. His greatest supporter would never issue another command again. New voices gained influence inside the halls of government quickly. Many argued the voyages consumed resources needed elsewhere urgently. Why explore distant oceans when challenges existed closer to home? The question sounded practical, reasonable, and difficult to dismiss. Yet practical decisions sometimes erase extraordinary possibilities from history entirely. Support for overseas expeditions weakened as priorities shifted dramatically. Maps, records, and plans lost protection from powerful advocates. Projects once celebrated now faced skepticism and political resistance instead. The fleet remained mighty, but its future grew increasingly uncertain. Zheng He watched changes unfold that no naval victory could stop. For the first time, the greatest threat came from home, and the consequences would reshape world history forever afterward. History remembers many empires destroyed by enemies, invasions, and wars. Zheng He's fleet met a very different fate entirely instead. No rival navy arrived to challenge its supremacy across oceans. No catastrophic storm sank hundreds of ships beneath the waves. No foreign kingdom conquered the fleet through overwhelming military force. The end came quietly, hidden within administrative decisions and policies. Shipyards slowed, funding disappeared, construction gradually ceased altogether nationwide. Sailors returned home while once busy docks grew increasingly silent. The machinery of exploration simply stopped moving forward anymore. Maps disappeared into archives where few people would ever see. Records faded from attention as generations passed without voyages continuing. The greatest maritime project of its era slipped into obscurity. Slowly, the fleet vanished, not physically at first, but culturally. Memory faded before the last traces of wood finally decayed. The world forgot what had once crossed its oceans proudly. Centuries later, European explorers would sail many similar routes independently. They became symbols of global exploration remembered throughout modern history, yet Zheng He had reached many destinations long before them. Historians still wonder what might have happened if voyages continued. Could global history have unfolded along an entirely different path? No one can answer because possibilities leave no historical evidence. What remains is the legacy of an extraordinary human achievement. A former captive connected distant civilizations across immense oceans successfully, and the greatest fleet ever assembled disappeared without a battle,